Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Shooting Straight, Living Life in Truth. I'm Charles, I'm your host for the evening, and today we're going to discuss a topic that's pretty sensitive for a lot of people. We're going to be talking about divorce and its devastation. Um, so I want to say up front right now, my intent for this episode is not to offend anyone, not to hurt anyone, uh, not to upset anyone. The point of this episode is to essentially bring awareness to uh, how rampant divorce is, what some of the issues it creates, and essentially to provoke some thought for us to be able to make the situation better, because I think we all know the attorneys aren't going to do anything about it because they're making too much money off of it. But let's uh, let's just realize that my heart is for the betterment of myself and for everyone else as well. And that's the intent and the purpose that I'm coming at this with. So it definitely is not intended to cause harm. It's not intended to hurt your feelings. It's not intended to do anything of that kind of a nature. It's merely just to provoke some thought and hopefully produce some positive change in the world around us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get a word from our sponsor.
Are you twisted enough for Twisted Minds escape rooms? Then check us out at twistedminds.com and book an adventure today. You can choose between Camp Calico or the mysteries of Vanished. How about travel back in time to 1840s California and visit Digger's General Store? Or get ready, coming late spring, early summer 2021, a little bit of mayhem at Twisted Minds escape rooms in Palm Coast. Check us out at twistedminds.com or give us a call at 888-92-TWIST. We'll be waiting.
Alrighty, welcome back. And if you ever get a chance to get into Palm Coast, I highly recommend that you take a moment to slide by Twisted Minds escape rooms and take advantage of playing one of the rooms. It's an experience you're not going to soon forget, and you will absolutely enjoy it. It's one of the best, if not the best, escape rooms in Northeast Florida and maybe in all of Florida. A lot of the escape room enthusiasts that have done it have come out and actually and done reviews and given feedback that it was the best escape room that they have done. Those guys put a lot of thought into it, and the staff there is just absolutely incredible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our subject for today. And initially, what I want to do is I want to go over some stats, and just so you can see where I get my stats from, so that you can take a look at all of them. We're going to put that up in the lower third right here. There is a ton of statistics on this website. It's actually the website of a group of attorneys, and they go over and cite numerous surveys and studies that have been done on the topic, and all of those are linked into that website. So take some time, go there, check them out, because the only ones I'm going to share today are some of the ones that I thought were most pertinent, and basically some of the ones that I felt were the most important. So let's go ahead and get into those, and we'll relate some stuff in the process while we're doing it. So the first statistic that I want to go over is that 16.9 couples out of 1,000 are getting divorced. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a whole lot initially, but when you stop and think about the fact that I lost there we go. I lost it again. Sorry, folks, we're having a slight technical issue here. I have a confidence monitor up that's showing me these statistics so that I'm not sitting here fumbling over them, and it, for some reason, it went out on me. But we got it back up. So 16.9 couples out of 1,000 are getting divorced. I know that doesn't really seem like a whole lot. 17 couples out of 1,000, but in the long run, that adds up really quick. Like in number 2, 50% of all marriages end in divorce. Number 3, 60% of second marriages end in divorce. And number 4, 73% of all third marriages end in divorce. Now, keep in mind, guys, these are statistics. These are historical track records, basically, of what has happened. It doesn't mean that it has to happen to you. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen to you. It doesn't mean that you're doomed to have this happen to you. It's just something to be mindful of and be aware of, because it doesn't have to happen to you. And it can be avoided with communication and understanding that these things happen, and working through a lot of these issues with your partner, with your spouse, to make sure that it doesn't happen to you. But just to give you an indication of how often and how frequent the 16.9 couples out of 1,000 is, that's where these next few statistics come in. With number 5, a divorce occurs every 13 seconds in America. That equates out to 277 divorces per hour and 6,646 per day, with 46,523 happening per week and 2.4 million a year. That's a lot of divorce. A lot of divorce. It's a lot of heartaches, a lot of trauma, a lot of devastating stuff going on. And just to kind of put that into perspective a little bit, that would mean that 9 divorces occur within the 2 minutes that it takes for a couple to recite their wedding vows. 9 divorces in 2 minutes. The amount of time that it takes one couple to say their wedding vows. 9 have gotten divorced. I don't know about you, but that's pretty staggering to me. And the average age of a couple that experiences their first divorce is at 30 years old. Now, I can personally relate to that because I got married when I was 25, and when I turned 30, we were separated, and the divorce paperwork ended up being filed just before I turned 31, and then a year later the divorce was finalized. And I'll get into more detail about that a little bit later, because that's a bit of a long story all on its own. But for now, let's go ahead and continue with some of these statistics, because I need to lay some groundwork and some framework to establish really just how important this topic is, not just for individuals, but for all of us as a whole, as a society, because it's far-reaching, and it's really having devastating effects on all of us. So 9 is the majority of divorces are initiated by the wife. In surveys and studies, they range anywhere from 66% to as high as 85% of divorces are initiated by the wife. And that varies from year to year, which is why there's no real actual solid kind of statistic on that. But the reasons that are given for the divorces include the following. There's a lack of commitment, which is cited 73 times. And before I go any further, let me just say, these percentages, just so you realize why they're not adding up to 100%, because that's one of those things that's always surprised me and bugged me when people do these things and put out these numbers, and then they're using percentages, but then the percentages don't add up to 100, and you're sitting there scratching your head going, that just doesn't compute. Well, the reason that these are this way is because within the survey, they noticed that the couples were actually reporting multiple reasons for their divorces. So it wasn't just one. So, like for example, with a lack of commitment, they might have also included that they argued too much or that there was infidelity. So those answers would have been counted twice, or would have had multiple answers, which explains why the percentages are so high and why they equal way more than 100% on this. But so lack of commitment was 73%. That was the number one reason why people cited the reason for their divorces. They argued too much was 56%. Infidelity was 55%. They married too young was 46%. Unrealistic expectations was at 45%. A lack of equality was at 44%. And a lack of preparation was 41%. And then domestic violence or abuse, which this surprised me, was only 25%. Now I say only 25%, and I'm not intending to minimize that, but I actually expected that number to be a little bit higher than just 25%. Nevertheless, even 0.0001% in this category to me is just too much. Because the domestic violence and the domestic abuse should never happen. That's just, to me, that's unfathomable. But it is what it is. It happens, and I think we as a society need to take a closer look at that, figure out what's going on there, why it's happening, and actually take a stand against it and do something about it. But other than that, let me just say right now up front, just so that I'm clear with everyone and so that you guys understand where I'm coming from and where my stance is on this. Marriage to me is something that has a very high value. So in my mind, a divorce, there's not many reasons in my mind that qualify for a divorce. The two main reasons that for me would qualify and quantify justifying a divorce would be the domestic violence and abuse and infidelity. And infidelity, I believe, if there's enough value on the relationship, it can be worked through. Now, it's not going to be an easy road. I'm not saying that it can be easily done, because that's a hard road to go through. And you'll understand where I'm coming from a little bit later when I relate to you my divorce story. But some of that comes into play in that. So, but moving along, because we still have quite a few to get through. When both people have had previous marriages, the likelihood of divorce rises to 90%. Now, that's one of those statistics that I was talking about earlier. Don't feel like that is saying that if you've gotten married and both of you have been married before and have gone through divorces before, don't take that as like a doomsday prophecy saying that you're doomed to end up in a divorce again, because you're not. That's one of those things that, with good communication and good partnership and working together, you can avoid that. Everybody's different. Everybody reacts to things differently, but nevertheless, if you really work together, you can actually get through those things. And that's going to be true with a lot of these. So please keep that in mind as we go through these, and don't let yourself get down or feel like you're doomed to failure in a marriage because of these statistics, because it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Number 12, 60% of cohabitators get married, and they have a 40% greater chance of ending in divorce than those who don't. Number 13, women who have cohabitated with more than one person prior to marriage are 40% more likely to get a divorce than those who did not cohabitate before marriage. Number 14, meeting your spouse in high school, college, or grad school provides a 41% less likely to divorce outcome. There's some good news for you guys. And let's see, 15 couples who meet in bars are 21% more likely to end in divorce. And there's a couple of other statistics coming a little bit later that fit in with that will explain that a little better. So we'll deal with that when we come to it. Number 16, the loss of virginity before age 18 correlates with a greater number of divorces within the first 10 years of marriage. So based on that statistic, I think it would be fair to say that it's probably smart if we start waiting till we're older before we start having sex, because this is kind of evidence that that sort of thing can mess things up and cause problems in a marriage. But again, it doesn't mean that it has to happen. That's another one of those things that can be communicated through and worked through if we're serious enough about those relationships. So number 17, women with 6 or more premarital partners are 3 times more likely to end up in a non-stable marriage. Now, from my understanding from the website, when they say a non-stable marriage is essentially a marriage that doesn't last more than 5 years. Which, my marriage lasted 5 years and that was it. But we'll get into the details of that later. So number 18, risk of divorce doubles when the wife goes out to work and the husband minimally contributes to housework and childcare. In other words, gentlemen, get off your lazy badonkadonk and get in there in the kitchen and do some dishes. Do a load of laundry. Take the kids out. Go get some ice cream. Go fishing with them. Go do something with them. Give mama a break. She needs one too. We need one. She needs one. So get off your lazy badonkadonk and get some dishes done. Okay, guys? Now, ladies, I have to balance this out so that I'm not picking on any particular person, because as we all know, marriage is a two-way street. It takes both parties. So ladies, if they get off their lazy badonkadonks and they do the dishes or they fold some laundry up for you, before you go criticizing them on that, be thankful that they got off their lazy badonkadonk and did it, first of all. Second of all, ask yourself one question. How important is it in comparison to your relationship? Is it for him to have fold the towels in thirds instead of halves? So, see what I mean? It's two-way street. And little things like this are the things that really add up and eventually end up to that we fell out of love scenario. But really, and I jokingly say these things, but in real life, come on, we've all been there. We know the reality of this stuff. So it's both ways. Guys, get up, help out around the house. Ladies, be thankful. Don't criticize quite so much, and be thankful that they did it and took a load off of your hands. 19. Facebook was cited as a major contributor in 1/3 of divorces in divorce petitions in the UK. Now that one I found interesting. And I found it interesting for a particular reason. But I will get into that later in my own story, because I had an experience with this with my ex, but it was on ICQ back before Facebook was even a thing. But I'll get into that later. Number 20, 56% of divorces cited pornography addiction as a factor. There's a lot of different ways we could go with that one, but I'm not going to touch it today. 21, happily married parents reduce the risk factor of divorce by 14%. Another positive. That's a good thing. All right. 22, if parents remarried, you are 91% more likely to divorce. Again, Don't take that as a doomsday prophecy. That's one of those things that can be worked through with the proper communication and proper effort on both parties' parts. Okay? So again, like I said, a lot of these things that is true with, so don't take it as a doomsday prophecy here. It's just historically this is what's been happening. Okay? 23. If one partner comes from a divorced family, there is a 50% greater chance of divorce. If both come from divorced families, there is a 200% greater chance of divorce. Wow. After everything I've said, now they're going to come out with 200%. Well, folks, that's only 2 times the amount. So if 3 times the amount isn't going to necessarily mean you end up in a divorce, then 2 times greater chance, no. But combination of all of these things eventually builds up, and yeah, it'll probably lead to divorce. But again, communication, working together, valuing your relationship, valuing the marriage, and doing the things necessary to keep that going can avoid a lot of these things. It doesn't mean you have to fall prey to these statistics. Again, historical track record of what's been happening doesn't mean it's going to happen. Because in fact, and this isn't in here, but in fact, the divorce rates are actually on the decline for the last, I think, decade or so now. Part of that is because fewer and fewer people are getting married, which to me is kind of sad because you're missing out on a huge part of life that is just incredible. But anyway, moving on. 50% of children will witness a parental divorce. Of those 50%, will witness a second parental divorce. Yep, that was me. My mom was married and divorced 3 times. I was around for 2 of them. Neither one of those was good. Number 25, annual income of $50K per year can reduce the risk of divorce by as much as 30% over those with incomes of $25K. Well, let's see. Considering the fact that many of the arguments that take place within a marriage, which was cited as being the number 2 reason why divorces happen, have a tendency to happen over income. So, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense if you really think about it. Because, I mean, really, who can actually live and sustain and take care of a family effectively under $50,000 nowadays? It's kind of tough, especially if you're a family of 4 or something like that. So that is perfectly reasonable, perfectly expected, but I threw it in there just so we could be aware of it, so we can think about these things and whatnot. So number 26, couples who argue about finances at least once per week are 30 times more likely to divorce. Gee, that's a big sign right there that probably before we get married, we should probably be having some conversations about how to deal with money as a couple. You know, how would you deal with this? How would you deal with that? What do you think this is, we need to do regarding this, that sort of stuff. I mean, hey, if you're going to argue about it once a week and it increases the chances of a divorce by 30 times, it's probably a pretty important topic to discuss before you actually get married. Now, this next one, guys, please don't beat up the messenger. I'm just reporting the stats, just reporting the historical data, so don't beat up the messenger, okay? This one I can't really relate to all that much because, quite frankly, I don't really drink a whole lot. I drink occasionally, not much, but hey, it is what it is. But number 27, 1 liter of alcohol consumption increases the chances of divorce by 20%. 1 liter. Just 1 liter. And the average American, I think, would probably go through that in a good month and a half, 2 months easily. So the rest of that one is this. The average American consumes 9.4 liters of alcohol per year. That increases the chances of a divorce by 188%. Throw that in with a few of these other statistics that we're going to see, and some ones that we've already seen, and you're approaching 300% chance of getting a divorce. Again, 3 times the chances of getting a divorce. Alcohol doesn't really do all that great for marriages. Unless, of course, you were part of one of these ones over the 9-year study that was done where both partners drank heavily, they were more likely to stay together. However, if only one spouse drinks heavily and the other does not, the divorce chance is raised by 60%. Oh boy. Some 9.4 liters, 188%. No, now we got only one spouse doing that. Now 188%, 60% increase. You see where this is leading, right? So yeah, we should probably reconsider some of this drinking stuff that we've got going on. Number 30. Number 30, I'm going to stop and talk about this one for a minute. Just because I've had some personal experience with this. Well, I may or may not get into more detail later, but I think I'm going to hit the highlights here. But it says mental disorders like addictions, major depression, and PTSD increase the chances to 80%. Now, for me, there's only one decision that I've ever made in my lifetime that I truly regret. And that goes all the way back to 1990, when I was deployed to Desert Storm. I spent over 6.5 months over there. Every day, living in the desert, living in a tent, surrounded by men. We had a few women because I was with a medical unit at the time. But every day for 6.5 months, living under high stress conditions, knowing that at any moment the enemy could come across that line and end my life in a second. It's a lot of stress, a lot of stuff to deal with over there. And after a while, I want to say it was a couple of months, I remember writing a letter home to my mom. Can't remember everything verbatim, but I do remember that the general gist of it was that even though I knew reality and my life was back here in the States, that reality and that life seemed like a dream, and the actual reality and life that I was living was the life that I was living over there. And it's odd to try and explain that feeling, but that's about as close as I can get to it. All right. So if you've ever gone to bed and you've fallen asleep and you had a dream that you were somewhere else, right? Well, that's kind of what my life felt like in the United States when I was over there. And that's what I was trying to explain in that letter. So long story short, when I got back here to the States, that sense, that feeling translated into, I could sit there and look at my friends that I had been friends with for years. And when I say years, I'm talking, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and feel absolutely empty inside when looking at them. Feeling like a complete stranger, like I didn't know them and they didn't know me. It was very awkward, and I was literally having to rebuild relationships from the ground up, and that even included my mother, because even when I talked to my mom, it was like that stranger feeling, that emptiness, that nothing there. When it came to dealing with her. And before I went to Desert Storm, I had gotten engaged to a young lady named Julie. Lovely woman. probably the best woman I ever got into a relationship with, and this is where that decision that I regret comes in. Because of everything that I was feeling and everything that I was experiencing at the time, when I spoke to her on the phone, I knew in my head that this was the woman that I had loved enough to ask her to marry me, to join her life to mine, and for us to take off and start life together as a team, working towards the same objectives, the same goals, with her skills complementing mine, and bringing us to bigger, better, greater, higher places in life. And I knew I loved her. I knew I would have given my life for her up here in my head. Would have done anything for her. But here, it was just empty. It was as if though I had never known her and I was talking to a complete stranger. And I can't tell you how scared that made me. And I ended up breaking it off with her. And the reason is really pathetic now that I look back on it. And I take complete ownership of being wrong in this. Always have, always will. It was a terrible mistake. I own it. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just explaining and expressing what happened. I had asked her to give me a little bit of space, not to push me to go from Oklahoma out to Salem, Oregon, where she was at the time. Just because everything was just so, everything was just in a crazy state. Sorry, I'm having some trouble hearing me. So I had to make some adjustments there on my headphones. Anyway, I was having such a hard time trying to deal with everything that I was having to deal with at the time, from everybody feeling like strangers and trying to rebuild so many relationships. And knowing that I was to commit my entire life to her, and yet she felt like a complete stranger. I was asking for a little bit of space and not to be pressured to go out to Salem to be with her right away, but just to take things slowly. Let's continue to talk over the phone so that I can gradually, rebuild our relationship in my heart and in my head. In order to move forward with it. And unfortunately, it seemed like every conversation that I had with her, that topic would come up. And I was feeling pressured. And in the process of feeling that pressure, the only thing that I wanted to have happen was to have that pressure off of me and relieved. And as a result, I pushed back by breaking it off with her. And to this day, that is the only decision in my life that I really regret. And I say that I regret it because I really do. Because when I think about that and I think about the relationship that we had, that was the best relationship I've ever had in my life. On a romantic level, in it's when I think back on it, I sometimes think to myself, where would my life have gone? What path would it have taken? What would have been different had I not made that decision and screwed that up royally? So yeah, I mean, mental disorders, mental problems, addictions, depression, PTSD, all of this stuff, folks, can play a role in the creation of divorces, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. If whoever the individual is who's not suffering from the mental disorder, the addiction, depression, PTSD, or whatever the case may be, if the person who's not dealing with that condition can take the time to slow down, set emotions aside, look into what's going on, and team up with the person who's experiencing it to get the help that's needed and work through that, it doesn't have to end the relationship. It doesn't have to end in divorce. It's one of those things that can be worked through. Number 31. 43% of children are being raised in the U.S. without their fathers. This is a stat we hear all the time, but it's an important one because when it comes to divorce, the children are the ones that end up paying the highest price for the divorce. And there's a lot of reasons for that, some of which I'll get into a little bit later when I relate to you my story about divorce. But number 32, 90% of divorced mothers have custody of their children. Over 79% of custodial mothers received a child support award, while just under 30% of custodial fathers received one. Over 40%, over 46% of non-custodial mothers completely default on child support. Only 27% of non-custodial fathers default. 19% of men report a significant drop in social support post-divorce. The average cost of a divorce is $15,000. Some can happen cheaper, some can happen more expensively, but that's the average cost of a divorce based on the stats. And families with children see their incomes drop almost 50%. And as a result, 50% of parents end up in poverty after a divorce. Now, when you stop and think about this for a second, when you look at all these statistics, is it any wonder why there's an issue with what's the term I'm looking for? Go ahead and bring up the next stats, because I think the term I'm looking for is on that next slide. Juvenile delinquency. Thank you. I mean, really, divorce happens. 50% of the income is lost. Father's not present. And I'm not going to go into the importance of fathers and them being present in their children's lives, because there's a lot of studies that have been done on it. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. It's common knowledge. Children need both parents. Now, I'm just going to finish these out real quick. A single divorce will cost the state, federal government $30,000 due to the increase in usage of food stamps, public housing, increased bankruptcies, and juvenile delinquency. Various studies show that divorces cost the taxpayer between $30 and $112 billion per year, and up to $1.5 trillion every decade. Now, that's a ton of money. That's a ton of money. I don't know about you, but what things could you think of that the government could spend $1.5 trillion on if we, the people, weren't so wrapped up in divorce? what kind of things could we eliminate from society if we had that extra tax dollar to put towards it. Again, I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just simply posing information to provoke thought and to think about these things. Because in my mind, many of the divorces that take place probably really didn't need to happen. Either because if there would have been a little bit more time put on the relationship ahead of time, maybe a little bit more preparation, maybe a little bit more commitment on both parties' parts to work through whatever comes their way, and maybe a little bit more commitment to the concept of fidelity and loyalty, we probably wouldn't be having issues with divorces. And we wouldn't be seeing some of the trends that we're seeing right now in modern society, where some men are pulling out of the dating scene because they just don't want to deal with it anymore, or people just refusing to get married because they don't want to deal with losing half of their income and ending up in poverty and having to start all over again and dealing with child custody issues and all the nightmares that go along with a divorce. And that's just the legal side of things. And then there's all the emotional damage that takes place. There's the things that the kids go through. You know, it just, divorce is not a good thing. It never is, never has been, never will be. And like I said, the only times where where it's like, okay, you know what, it's completely justified, and that's with abuse, domestic violence, abuse, and infidelity, if the two parties aren't capable of working through that issue. It can be done. It's a long, it's a hard, it's an arduous road, but it can be worked through. It's been done. Um, but for most people, no, no, you cheat on me, we're done. It's over. Um, and to be honest, I can't blame them. I mean, that's a betrayal. I mean, at the core of who we are as human beings, really. Um, and I say that, and I don't say that lightly, because I got married, and to be honest with you, there were some red flags there, but I was all caught up in the pitter patter, flutter, butterflies in the tummy tums, and the sunshine and unicorns going off all over the place inside. And I didn't want to see them. I really didn't. Um, and I was an idiot for doing it, for ignoring those red flags. I ended up getting married, and literally 3 months into the marriage, and I was banned from the kitchen because she didn't like how I cooked. So I wasn't allowed to cook, even though I can cook. She just didn't like the way I cooked. And I would always clean up afterwards. But she didn't like it, so she said I was banned from the kitchen. So there went my kitchen duties. And other things started taking place. And then next thing I know, I'm coming home, and there are certain signs that something happened. And she cheated on me 3 months into the marriage with an ex-fiance. And at that time, I didn't say anything. I mean, it was pretty obvious. It was pretty obvious that it happened. It's pretty obvious where it happened. And the fact that when she came home, she went straight to the shower, didn't hug me, didn't kiss me, didn't say hello, just came in, went straight to the bedroom, got a change of clothes, got a towel, went straight to the bathroom, took a shower, came out, and then she started talking to me. And that was so contrary to what she normally did. that was just another sign that something was up. And I didn't say anything because, to be honest with you, I was already convinced of it. But I wanted to wait to see how long it would take. And it took about a month and a half before her conscience got the better of her and she fessed up. And I told her I knew, which obviously she was shocked by that. She said, how? And I broke it down. And I explained it to her how I knew. And I said, but the reality of the fact is that I love you. And I committed the rest of my life to you. Now, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know how we're going to get by this. Because either your conscience is going to eat at you. And it's going to take a toll on our marriage. Or mine's going to eat at me. And it's going to take a toll on our marriage. It may take some time, but I'm willing to try and work through it. And we did. Took a couple of years, but we got through it. And things seemed pretty good until I came out of AIT for medic school and we went to Fort Campbell, which was my first duty station as a Army medic. About a year into that assignment, and I started noticing some things between her and one of my co-workers. Now, when I say one of my co-workers, I was working in pre-hospital care, i.e. on ambulances. I was an EMT basic. Civilian-wise, I was an EMT basic. However, in military sphere, in the back of that ambulance, I could actually operate at the level of a paramedic and often did. But when I say he was a work associate and a work partner, I mean we worked on the same ambulance together quite a bit as partners. So in a sense, he was like my best bud. The kind of person that would have been your best man at a wedding. And I found out. I figured it out. I saw some things, put two and two together, watched her attitude towards me change, her mannerisms towards me changed, the vocal tones in her voice changed towards me, the way she kissed me changed me. The intimacy factor in the bedroom drastically declined. I mean, there was a lot of things going on that it was just like, it's not just what I'm seeing going on between the two of you, but it's also what I'm seeing going on between the two of us. And after this had been going on for a couple of months, and she wasn't coming forward and saying anything, and I noticed that things were happening on a repeated basis, and it wasn't just a one-time thing, it was time to confront her. So I took her to dinner. Pretty much didn't give her a choice. Picked up my oldest daughter. Picked up the youngest daughter, who was an infant, and, we're talking maybe 6 months old at this point. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. My youngest daughter wasn't even born yet, so it's just my oldest daughter, and she was, at the time, I want to say she was 1 or 2 years old at the time. And we went out to dinner. And the reason I took her out to dinner was because I wanted to confront her, but I didn't want all the drama. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a scene caused and that we could actually have a reasonable conversation about what was going on. Well, she denied it. She denied it emphatically. So I was okay. So I took it to my platoon leader, who was my section sergeant, i.e. my boss in the Army. And I said, I don't I don't want anything to happen because I can't prove anything yet, but I have my suspicions, and I think I'm pretty reasonable in suspecting it. And I laid everything out to him. And I said, but I don't want anything done about it because I don't want this jeopardizing his career if I'm not correct. And my platoon sergeant looked at me and he goes, son, I don't think I've heard any more of a solid case for someone cheating on their spouse than what I'm hearing right now, but I will make you this promise. I have no choice but to do something about this, but I will make sure that it does not get to the first sergeant's level. All right, so we will handle this in house. And then when I when that assignment was over, we worked through some stuff there. We resolved some issues and things. And then I got transferred to Germany. Then when we were in Germany, it happened yet a third time. Only this time, she decided to leave. She took the kids with her and came back to Florida. Then turned around, well, and when she left, she took a month and a half worth of pay, left me holding the bag with 3 months worth of unpaid bills, and then turned around and reported to my chain of command that I had abused her, abused the children, cheated on her, and wasn't paying her child support. Now, at this particular point in time, no court order had been issued. Nothing had gone through the courts. There was no order, no requirements for me to pay child support. Nevertheless, because I love my kids, I was sending her money every month. And I pointed that out and I showed that to my first sergeant. And then, as far as cheating on her, I asked for a specific date as to what she claimed, and the date that she gave was when we were in the field and I was surrounded by nothing but men. And I'm not gay. I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community. I have nothing against them. It's just not me. And I looked at the first sergeant, and this was, back during the times of don't ask, don't tell in the military. And I said, I'm not telling, you didn't ask, but quite frankly, it's impossible for me to have cheated because during that date, we were actually out in the field. And if you look at your calendar, you'll see that too. And then as far as the abuse of the kids and abuse of her, I said the medical records are still over there in the medical clinic. You're more than welcome to go over there and get those medical records and look for yourself. There's absolutely no evidence that I've ever abused my wife or my kids. Yet, on the same token, when she suspected me of emotionally cheating on her and having an emotional affair with someone that I was merely discussing creative writing with over ICQ, I was literally writing a story at the time, and I was bouncing it off of this person for feedback and what they thought, and I was specifically seeking a female's perspective on the writing, which is why I was talking to this person who, mind you, was all the way over on the other side of the country, 3 time zones away. Yet I was having an affair, and at one point she saw me on there on ICQ discussing this book with this person, and the next thing I know, my head is pinned to the keyboard of my laptop with her laying on top of me. And I couldn't breathe. So, I mean, it's a crazy story. It's a long story, but unfortunately, I'm coming up on my 1 hour time frame when I got like 5 minutes left. So, instead of dragging on, continue on with more of my stories or whatnot, I want to go ahead and open things up for the question and answer time. If you guys are over on YouTube, you have the ability to chat there and send us some comments. If you have any questions, send us some comments there on YouTube. You can also... no, that's not the right thing. It should have the phone number and stuff to be able to call in. Do what?
That's the one that's on here.
Okay. So, well, apparently something happened and it messed up our our phone number stuff. Let's see. Give me just a second. Let me call myself so I can get you guys the number. But in the meantime, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and send us your questions, any comments, um, anything you want some more clarification on, anything like that. Just go ahead and send those in to me now. And as far as the phone number to call in your questions, that would be 294 7039. Again, that's 294 7039.
Here's a question.
Ending student loan debt has nothing to do with divorce, Danielle. That's what we're talking about today.
You said, what could we do with 1 point something trillion?
Oh, well, got a point there. What could we do with 1.5 trillion? Yeah, we could eliminate some of that student debt, that's for sure. Yeah, that's one thing we could do for it, with it. So we have any questions or anything coming in? Anybody on chat? Give me just a second. Okay, sorry about that. We had a little bit of a discussion trying to make it possible for her to be able to see your chats so we know what's going on, if anything. So, any questions? Anybody? Sure, somebody's got some questions. No? All right then.
Here's the only other one.
You're welcome, Danielle. All right, guys. Well, in that case, if there's no questions, no comments, no interactions, then we'll go ahead and call this a day. And we will see you guys in the next live stream. And hopefully you'll be a little bit more interactive there. And by the way, if you enjoyed this content, if you've seen any of the other videos in this series, please go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that and ring that bell so that you can get the notifications when we do more videos. It would actually be a huge help for me. Doing these live streams and getting all the equipment and everything else that needs to happen for all of this stuff, it can get pretty expensive. So I would definitely appreciate your support. If you appreciated this content and whatnot, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for me. All right? So until next time, you guys have a great week and enjoy yourselves.